This Table Talk is made possible by Chronic and Mighty, a newsletter from themighty.com. I'm Ashley, and I'm joined by...
I'm Kat.
And I'm Skye. And today, in honor of this coming out just before Halloween, we're talking the good, the bad, the scary. That is health representation in media. Whether that is a TV show, a book, a movie, a game, you name it. So first, I just want to start, has there been any, media that has or has absolutely not, resonated with your experience?
One thing everyone should know about me is that I am a voracious reader. It is absolutely my go-to distraction, much more so over TV and movies. So I'm going to leave that to other people. But I will say, I'm a gigantic romance reader, and I almost read exclusively books with some type of health representation, because there are so many good ones out there, and since it's my main mode of entertainment, I like to see it. So I want to give a shout out to a few different authors who are doing great things. Jean Meltzer is incredible. Not only does she have really good chronic illness representation, especially chronic illness representation that is smaller known conditions, so like pelvic floor stuff, also chronic fatigue syndrome. Love to see that, and also really great Jewish representation as well. Talia Hibbert does really great stuff on fibro and autism and PTSD. And then we have Chloe Leese, who has an entire series called The Bergman Brothers, and every single book is focused around a sibling who also has some type of a condition, like there's deafness representation, panic attack representation. What about you, Skye?
I've been going through a phase. Okay, it's probably been my whole life phase. I love reading nonfiction. I'm going to write down all your recommendations, Kat, because I could use some more, lighthearted health representation. Trying not to focus on what I'm calling my sad, sick girl tour of memoirs that have great representation, but are also very real and raw and make me feel some type of way that I have to talk about in therapy the following week. I rely much more on, for fictional representation, like movies, TV shows, video games. Kat and Ashley are so tired of hearing about my love for this one show, but here, we're bringing it back. That's right, kids. It's your favorite friend from Australia. It's Bluey. It's not just your baby siblings show, I promise you. Bluey Healer, amazing kid, love her, great main character, shows are iconic. Each episode's only 7 minutes, so if you have my attention span, perfect. But even though it's a kid's show, it's so emotionally mature, and there's one episode in particular called The Purple Pants, or I think that's what it's called. Anyway, plot synopsis, Bingo's in the hospital. They don't say why, but, she's really tired of being there. Bingo's Bluey's younger sister, for those not hip enough to know. Yeah, Bingo's in the hospital. She's feeling really lonely, and she's upset that, she still has to stay another day. And she's like, well, why am I, the only kid or dog who's ever been sick? And Bluey and the rest of the family, they make a video showing that, hey, everybody gets sick sometimes. Even, some people are sick for longer periods of time than others. But everybody, we can share our common humanity through illness or something like that. And by the end, you're like, hey, it's okay. Some people have acute illness, some people have chronic, some people have to go to the doctor for theirs, but it's all okay because we all love and support each other. Also, it has the most iconic line from Muffin ever, if you know, you know.
I know nothing about Bluey, but I will say I support the theme of that episode. Ashley, do you watch Bluey? I just need to know if I am alone.
I do not, but my nephew watches Bluey, so I've heard from a 3-year-old's perspective, which is not... I don't actually know what the show is about from hearing it from him, so... But that being said, I do think that we can just take that whole soundbite here and we got to send it to whoever produces Bluey and go all right, can we get paid for some marketing here to appeal to the Australian Broadcast Corporation? Hit me up. There we go. There, get the U.S. adult audience. Lin-Manuel Miranda was on the most recent season. Somebody pay for me to get Disney Plus so I can watch it, please. Oh, no. But yeah, Ashley, what health media do you like that's not, a cartoon Australian dog? That's fair. I definitely didn't have that one on my list. I actually have a really short list, and in all honesty, I'm actually someone who consumes a lot less media than I feel like people would guess for me. And so the ones that I did come to mind were ones that had a really powerful effect on me. Everyone here, probably so many people at this company, many people outside of this company, know my love of the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Rachel Bloom, she took her like personal experience and put it out through that show. Obviously, her character doesn't quite match up to her as a person, but she hits a lot of those like in the mental health space, those like really key moments that a lot of people who live with a mental illness or are struggling with their mental health could probably really relate to. It's a show that I like love hate to watch because it's really validating, but that means there are some really hard episodes. You know, when she talks about confronting the darkness, when she talks about getting a diagnosis and how like good that moment feels. Or like all of these, they seem like quote unquote small moments, but they're like really big if you're in the middle of it. So that one is just a love of mine.
I also love Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and I think what was so cool about it is that it's BPD in which it covers, and it's such a stigmatized mental illness. In fact, I would say that personality disorders in general tend to be where the really bad part about media representation comes from, which further stigmatizes them. But I love that they tackled BPD, and also the songs are they're really addictive. I love listening to them whenever I need a boost. Skye, get on it. I know you haven't watched it.
I know that's a show that I know that I've watched so many songs and like videos from. I love Rachel Bloom's work in general. I've been too afraid to watch it because I know it'll hit hard and resonate so well that I'm like afraid of how much I know I'll relate to the show and her character. That's very fair. I definitely can like, I can sit in her shoes because I feel like I sit in the worst moment. Because like I really like about the show that like you don't necessarily always like all the characters if they're making human mistakes or their, you know, health is impacting them in some way that's leading to. And so I really just like it just feels so human, I guess would be the best way to put it. The other one that I wanted to mention was Jessica Jones. And I'm mentioning this because I actually had to stop watching the show because of how good the representation was in it, particularly the like PTSD trauma representation. It's hard to watch. If you're someone who's had like that experience, it's really hard to watch, but it's because it hits so strongly. So yes, that's a recommendation, but it's also kind of like a warning if you're someone who experienced that. I can't believe I like forgot to put that one on my list. That is a show I watched like the entire first season of. I think I watched. Was there a second season? I might have watched it. I don't know. But yeah, Jessica Jones, that was the show that made me realize that maybe I do have some trauma to heal from. Like that really got me started on a harder but also more beneficial therapeutic journey, to be honest, like in my mental health care. No, that was a really tough but important watch. But like take care of yourself if you watch it.
You both bring up a really good point, which I actually hadn't thought of, probably because I submerse myself in it so often, but this concept of being in the right headspace to actually consume media that has really good representation. And that's perhaps why I soften my reading with the romance, because, you know, it's all got to end with the happily ever after, so that I know all the painful stuff before it ends that way. And perhaps the formulaicness of it is like what gets me going. But you're totally right. Like, it can be hard to watch really realistic representations, especially if you have the condition yourself. It almost feels too visceral. It feels too like looking in a mirror. I've never thought about that before.
I also think there's a really interesting thing here too that we could talk to about, which is like medical dramas and how they're just like there's a whole genre. We know all of the classics, but they're just a whole thing. But like, I can't watch those anymore. Like, I used to be able to watch those growing up, but since I went through everything with my cancer journey, anything gore, anything body horror, anything medical, can't do it at all. I will have to turn it off. It was the first time I ever had like a panic attack in the middle of media was watching some body horror in one M. Night Shyamalan film, I think. And so I just like, I realized it's something I have to avoid now, that horror was a staple of my growing up. And so the fact that I can't watch some horror now is very, very weird to me. But I have to do it because of my own, like, I know what's going to happen if I do. And that's much harder than avoiding it.
Medical dramas are a great representation of shows that go wrong in terms of the health experience. They infuriate me because most of the time, while it's cool to hear them sometimes mention diagnoses that don't often get mentioned in the mainstream, it's just usually how someone gets there. Like, diagnoses happen overnight, apparently. People who have doctors who constantly communicate with each other, apparently. How you pay for a procedure or, you know, testing never comes into play. Gaslighting tends to not be a part of it.
Oh man, now I'm just thinking about the EDS episode of Grey's Anatomy, and my sister's like, yo, they mention your condition, you gotta watch this. Not impressed. Like, glad they mentioned it, but not impressed. But I do want to go back to, Ashley mentioned someone I love to hate, M. Night Shyamalan. That's probably pretty strong. I'm sure I've seen something that I like of his. Actually, I don't know. I don't think I watch his movies. Anyway, we talked a bit about this before we started recording about how we couldn't come up with many examples of like bad representations that we have viewed or that we have consumed or that we have watched knowing they will be bad. Like, we talked about how we tend to avoid representations of illness that we know aren't great. Like, basically every M. Night Shyamalan film. Looking at You, Split. I refuse to watch that. Like, get out of here. Are you kidding me? Going back to like personality disorders being heavily stigmatized, like, what do you think you're adding to society by perpetuating so much stigma? Absolutely unnecessary. But yeah, like, I avoid things like that. I don't watch horror movies where like the entire basis of it is mental illness or it's like, oh, this guy's a psycho. Like, get out of here with that. It's unnecessary. You can do horror and like other, I don't know, quote unquote intense media without perpetuating stigma. I'm looking at you, Babadook. You did a pretty good job with Grief.
Oh, that's a good one. I forgot about that one. But what I'm getting is this is a pro Bluey, anti M. Night Shyamalan podcast at this point.
That is my platform for everything now.
I'll take it. So I think we kind of started touching on this a little bit, but you know, what makes something good? What do you want to see more of or read more of or consume more of when you are looking for that kind of media, you are looking for that kind of representation?
There are two things that matter to me. One thing I love to see is when an illness, a disability, anything like that is actually not a part of the plot. Where someone in the movie or the book or the TV show, I think of Superstore actually comes to mind. There is a disabled character. He is in a wheelchair, which is not just a part of the plot. And the only self-deprecating jokes come from him. And I think it's a great example of people are disabled. They're hanging out among us, but we surely don't need to make it part of the plot line, right? So there's one. Or two, I actually really appreciate it when it shows kind of the hard everyday realities of living with illness. It doesn't always need to be this person is in the hospital, right? It's, oh, this person goes to a restaurant and they're having a hard time picking what to eat on the menu because they have a history with, I don't know, food trauma or based on something in their family, right? I like those real life examples that are not either end of the spectrum. You're either dying or you're living, and you know, there's a lot happening in between. What about you both?
Something that has really opened my eyes to what media could be has been, and this is the other thing I can't stop talking about lately. It's my current hyperfixation video game. It's Disco Elysium. And I know I'm super late to the party, but this game, trying to how best to explain what I love about it in terms of mental health representation is you communicate with like different parts of your brain and different aspects of your personality. Like, you'll talk to the rhetoric side of your brain. You'll talk to your hand-eye coordination. This game has the most frank discussion of suicide that I've ever seen. And it's not like, oh, we can't talk about it or we're just going to play it for laughs or whatever. It's like, no, your character works through being suicidal. And it just really resembled, I think, a journey I've been on where it's like, okay, here's, you know, my only option. Like, I'm in so much pain mentally and physically, but then you work on it and you keep crawling out of this pit you're in, and it's hard work. And I think this game doesn't shy away from any of it. And I would really like to see that more in media, kind of, Kat, what you're saying, like the everyday reality of living with these things. I know this is nonfiction, but Fun Home, the book and musical by Alison Bechdel, who wrote the graphic novel, that was the most accurate representation of OCD I've ever seen. And specifically, she writes and draws about it, how she experienced it as a child. And she perfectly, like, at least it was so relatable to see a visual and verbal representation of the rituals people do. And it wasn't like, oh, I have to straighten this picture, I have to whatever. That's perfectly valid if that's part of your OCD experience. But it really, I think, made what can be an inaccessible diagnosis to understand, or there's so much misconception about it, into something that anybody could be like, oh, okay, I get that now. Like, I get what she's saying.
I honestly don't think I have much more to add to that because I think you have both covered it really well, because I do think showing the like quote unquote mundane of what it's like to live with a condition is really important, because otherwise we get all or nothing. We get, I am functioning, quote unquote, and fine, or I am suddenly very sick. And it's like, no, you're probably feeling some variation of that the whole time. We're just now only seeing it in this one moment for, dramatic effect or whatever purpose it's supposed to be. So I'd say like showing that every day, because a lot of the symptoms people experience are true to most people. So people can connect to that even if they don't live with a mental illness, even if they don't live with a disability. Some of those things are really common experiences and set. And then that other piece of like finding accessible ways to explain complicated things. Go into it with this, drive to, if someone has no idea about this condition, you have two choices. You can go with all the stigmatized, stereotypical things, or you can go, what's the stuff people don't know about this thing that I can talk about? Thank you both. This was a great conversation. I hope that everyone has some good recommendations for things to go either look at or completely avoid if they will not work for you. Thank you both again for being here. And is there anything else anyone wants to say before I wrap?
Yes, I just wanted to add one more thing. The last thing I want to say, and I'm very proud to say this, especially who, works and lives very intensely in the health space, is that we are living in a heyday of incredible representation when it comes to health conditions. Never have we had so many good options of things to watch and read. It's actually very easy to find good ones and avoid the bad ones. So I just want to say, keep going, creators. I think we've really turned a corner in terms of nuance and diversity of experiences. So thumbs up. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I know, part of me is like, I need to convince everyone I am an adult. But my other examples are, Downton Abbey, great. Dimension 20, great representation of all kinds. And I'm just like rapid fire, but it's all D&D podcasts.
Love it, love it. Alrighty, all. Well, before we wrap up this episode, we just wanted to let everyone who is listening know that we're going to be taking a bit of a table talk holiday hiatus, so we can come back with even better things for you. In the meantime, you can listen to one of our other podcasts, join us on the Mighty app for daily conversations. And of course, if you want more conversations like this, subscribe to Chronic and Mighty by going to bit.ly/spoonyinbox. That's bit.ly/SPOONIEINBOX. We'll see you in your inbox. Bye, everyone.
We'll miss you. Bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.